Okay, so why are amyloid fibrils toxic to the cell? That is because it can get accumulated in a very large quantity, forming plaques and Lewy bodies, and both are misfolded protein aggregates that are toxic to the cells. So if you look at the picture below, these protofibrils or these amyloid fibrils can arrange themselves in different structures, such as spherical, chain-like, or annular structures, which can actually go through or penetrate through the cell membrane, leading to cell death. And what are the consequences of amyloid fibril formation? As we discussed before, you have a number of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's. And we have also discussed about prion diseases such as the mad cow disease. But in fact, even type 2 diabetes can be caused by the accumulation of amyloid fibril, which will eventually degrade the function of the beta cell. Latest studies suggest that our immune system can actually fight against the Alzheimer's and other diseases caused by protein misfolding by specifically targeting the amyloid fibrils. So it is very important to keep your immune system strong. So in the subsequent part, we will look at some neurodegenerative diseases which are caused by the accumulation of amyloid fibrils affecting the brain. And they are the most occurring type of age-related protein misfolded diseases. So what happens here in the neurodegenerative diseases is that protein aggregation happens in the brain cells. Then they disrupt the function of neuron or the myelin sheath. Eventually, it causes dysfunction such as memory loss or movement disability. Okay, here in this picture, I just want to show you the structure of a typical neuron. And specifically, I'll point you to the myelin sheath, which is the blue layers insulating the axon for impulse transmission. So imagine this, when you have the accumulation of a lot of protein, misfolded protein or protein aggregate around this myelin sheath, what you will do is to disrupt signal transmission along the axon. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of neurodegenerative disorder, and where you have a massive loss of neurons. So this disease is caused by the accumulation of misfolded protein known as the alpha beta amyloid protein. Sometimes they are known as the amyloid plaques, and they are found outside of the neurons, or it can be caused by the accumulation of the tau protein. So as mentioned just now, the amyloid fibril can be found outside of the cell or inside of the neuron. So if they are found inside of the neuron, it can be toxic to the cell and eventually kill off the neuron. Or if the plaque, such as the amyloid plaque, are found outside of the neuron, it can interfere with signal transmission. Here, I just want to show you the effect of Alzheimer's on human brains. So on the left, you can see how does a normal brain looks like. While over the right hand side, you have an Alzheimer's brain. So very clearly, you can see there is massive loss of neurons and brain shrinkage, which is very horrible because you can't really grow back the lost regions. So what are the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease? First of all, they will encounter memory impairment. Normally, they can remember things in the past, but they will struggle with new information. And as disease progresses, they will also lose their long-term memory. And then they will have inability to think and inability to function independently, as they will get confused very often and emotionally unstable. So it is really a huge responsibility taking care of any Alzheimer's patient. Okay, here is just a projection of worldwide Alzheimer's prevalence, and it's going to increase as the population increases, as stress level, radiation increases. And as for Malaysia, currently we have roughly about 120,000 patients of dementia. But please bear in mind, dementia refers to group of symptoms that impact memory, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Okay, coming next, we will look at the Parkinson's disease. It is the second most common type of neurodegenerative disease due to aging. So it is caused by the accumulation of another type of misfolded protein, which in this case is an alpha-synuclein protein, or sometimes we call it a Lewy body. So in Parkinson's disease, it primarily affects neurons in an area called the substantia nigra. And some of these dying neurons produces less dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter needed for movement and coordination. Now let's look at the structure of a human brain. Where can you find substantia nigra? It is right over here, which is in the midbrain section. And do you know why it is called nigra? That is because it actually looks darker than its surrounding. So it sounds probably a bit racist, right? But this part was named about 200 years ago when slavery was still very common. So under normal conditions, dopamine will be secreted from substantia nigra, and they will be secreted and sent towards striatum, which is an input module for voluntary movement control. So as you get less dopamine because of the impairment with your substantia nigra, you expect more unregulated movement control by the Parkinson's patient. So that explains why they will have shaky hands and so on. So in this diagram, you can see that a normal neuron secretes a large quantity of dopamine, but in the Parkinson's affected neuron, due to the accumulation of the alpha-synuclein misfolded proteins, you have much less dopamine production, and that leads to movement disorders. Okay, so in this diagram, I just want to show you how does Lewy bodies or the alpha-synuclein aggregates look like. So these pinkish patches inside the cells are actually the Lewy bodies. And what are they made of? They're actually misfolded proteins that are assembled into amyloid fibrils. Here are some symptoms of Parkinson's. First, patient will encounter muscular rigidity associated with extreme pain. They will get postural instability. In other words, they tend to fall down very frequently because they cannot balance themselves. Of course, the resting tremor, such as shaky hands and shaky legs. Last but not least, we will look at another example of neurodegenerative diseases, which is the Huntington's disease. So it is caused by the accumulation of a misfolded protein known as huntingtin. So it is a type of polyglutamine disease in which you have mutations encoding for additional glutamine amino acids. So Huntington's causes progressive breakdown of the brain cells, and it deteriorates physical and mental abilities of the affected persons. So Huntington's disease is actually a genetic disorder because it is caused by a genetic mutation on the chromosome number 4. So that causes extra glutamine amino acid, which is more than 36, while in the normal proteins, you should have less than 36. And as a result, the protein is misfolded and aggregated as huntingtin. So these are just some additional information. So the symptoms of Huntington's disease are pretty similar to other types of neurodegenerative disease.